100,000 other students and wondering, how do I stand out from the crowd? In this video, I'm going to go through some insider tips on how to make your UC application its most awesome and increase your chances potentially of getting in. Now, if you're applying to schools beyond UCs and you want to get your test scores up, please check out supertutortv.com. We've got a couple of online courses for the SAT and the ACT I'd love for you to check out. I've also got a couple of math books for the ACT, and totally for free if you want an update on what video we've got coming out each week. Make sure you subscribe to our newsletter, supertutortv.com/subscribe. We're also on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, so make sure you like and subscribe. Awesome. So UCs, unlike many other competitive colleges, kind of roll to their own beat. They have their own rules, they have their own parameters in terms of formulas that they use to see who gets in and who doesn't. So in this video, I'm going to try to give you some perspective on how they are different from other colleges. And with that knowledge, I want you to use that knowledge and understand that context as you apply to them to either A, understand what your chances are of getting in, or B, position yourself so that you can have the most success and get what you want out of this process. Cool? So my first tip for UCs, which is really unique to the UC system, is be smart about your major selection. So when you apply to UCs, you're going to have to declare a major at every single campus that you're applying to. And there is something of a game to this, you guys. All majors are not equal at the University of California. And there's a really cool tool you can use to kind of figure out your probability of admission depending on the major that you select. So there's this website, and we're going to put the link to this in the blog that goes with this video. Now, this chart is not admission rates for freshmen. We don't have the data on that. UCs haven't released that. But it is information about transferring. And the transfer rates into these programs gives you two pieces of information. One, how impacted it is a major if I change my mind and decide later I want to get into it at this particular UC campus. How hard might that be comparatively? And two, how popular is a major overall, and what are my chances of getting in as a freshman? So right now I have UCLA pulled up. You can see right here in the dropdown, I got all 9 campuses there and all this data, and you can see how many applicants, how many admits, how many enrolls, all this kind of good stuff. But if you are trying to figure out what to put as your major and you're applying as a freshman, though these percentage rates, these admit percentage rates are not going to be the same for freshman admits. They are a general loose tool that I use with my students so that you know which majors are more popular than other majors. Now, when it comes to declaring your major, I know it can feel, again, really early when you're in high school, but there is some latitude to change your major once you get on campus. And it's often a lot easier to get into a major when you already attend the school than it would be to try to transfer in and guarantee that you will be in that major after you get there. So a lot of times when I have super competitive majors, like computer science, for instance, I will have students who, instead of applying for computer science, they're maybe not even sure they want to do computer science, but they know they want to do engineering. They'll apply to another engineering major. Now, here's what's important. If you want to eventually possibly end up somewhere else that's very competitive, you want to make sure that you're in the same school. So here, you see how this is School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, this computer science at UCLA. If I wanted to get into that program, I would want to apply at least to something engineering here. Now, some of you, that's too stressful. It's too stressful to say, I don't want to apply to UCLA and not be computer science because I know I want to do computer science. You know what? If that's the case, fine. Apply UCLA computer science only. And you know what? If you don't get into computer science, fine. You can walk away. But you can see how you can kind of game it a little bit. And then maybe you're also interested in ME. Well, ME's got a 14% admit rate. That's nicer, right? That's a little bit higher. So maybe you apply mechanical engineering instead of CS because you know you want to do one or the other. And then you could transfer over, etc. If you have questions on particular majors, you should contact the independent schools. Granted, there's going to be some majors where moving around is going to be a lot harder. For example, film and television at UCLA, theater at UCLA, music. These kind of majors you generally want to apply straight into and know that you got in because transferring into them can be extremely difficult. Okay, my number two tip for UC schools is UCs love students who are the best in their context. UCs, more than any other schools that I coach students for, really want to look at you guys according to how you perform against your peers. What does that translate into? Well, it translates into this. If you go to a public school, you have a lot better shot at a UC if you're a well-performing student at a public school than if you go to a private school, and you would be comparable to those students at the public school, but you're kind of middle of the pack or like maybe top 10%, top quartile at your private school because there's only 60 kids. So to be in the top 2% means you got to be the top number one valedictorian, right? And there's too many competitive kids at your school. So in general, if you're at a private school and you know your class rank isn't super high, you're going to be the person who this is a tougher admit for relative to someone who's at a public school that maybe isn't as highly ranked or as rigorous, but
Want to pass your certification exams first time? At Exam Labs, we've got
that kid who's at the top of the class. Number 3, address your weaknesses. Really important if you have any weaknesses that you address these in your UC application. I have found that UCs are more forgiving than a lot of other colleges, but only if you explain yourself. So the place to explain yourself or to admit that you have a hole in your application in some way is the additional information section, the additional comments, I think it's called, section. So make sure you fill that out if there is an elephant in the room. If you have a C on your transcript, explain it. If you've got a B minus, explain it. If you're otherwise all A's, I want to know what happened. If you didn't do any activities freshman year, why? Right? If you didn't do any activities during COVID, you can still explain that. Now, this also goes for people who are doing waitlist letters and things for UCs. If you made a mistake in your original application, if your essays were crap and you admit it, a lot of times I see UCs reverse decisions or allow people off waitlists. So a good thing to know. Tip number 4, UCs are race blind. I don't know if this is a tip so much as a context. Again, I think it's really important that you understand schools and their mentality and their context before you apply to them so you understand how your story fits with their story. But I will say that if you're an underrepresented minority, telling underrepresented minority kind of stories often can be, an ace in the hole at a really top university. It's not so much at UCs, race alone. That doesn't mean that you can't talk about that in one of your essays if you identify with it. You can, but just know that you're not going to get like the automatic boost that you might get at another college or university because that's the policy. That being said, if you have some other factor like your low income or your first generation, talking about those kind of things could get you brownie points at a UC. Next up is that UCs are test blind. I know many of you know this. I've got a ton of videos on this, so you can go and watch the news cycle videos if you want to check that out. But basically, UCs aren't going to look at your test scores, period. However, if you are good at tests, there are a couple of places you can load it in. One is if you're an AP Scholar, right? You can put AP Scholar in your awards. There's an awards section still. If you're a National Merit Scholar, you can put that in. It's not your test score, but it says something about your test taking abilities. So if you're really good at tests, there is a way to sneak it into your UC application. If you're part of the National Hispanic Recognition Program, you can put that in your honors and awards. So that's kind of the back door to inserting test scores on a UC application. So if you know that you're really good at standardized tests and you're a freshman, you're a sophomore, and you want to apply to UCs, my best advice to you is do really well on the PSAT, because then you can kind of slip into them that you're good at tests. And if you don't crush the PSAT, you're not going to be able to submit a test score at all, at least for the next few years. We'll see how things pan out in the long run, but that's where we're at right now. Cool. Number 6, don't ignore your waitlist letter and know how appeals work. So my next tip for UCs is know that students absolutely every year get off the waitlist, and every year even can appeal the decision that the college has handed them. So it's not over till it's over with UCs, which is actually, I think, kind of cool and kind of great. On average, about 30% of students who are freshmen walking around on Berkeley's campus pre-COVID were off the wait list. COVID screwed a lot of things up and things got a bit crazy, so I don't know where we're at with that. But as we kind of return to normal, I expect that number to be back to where it was. UCLA, I think 10% on average are getting off the wait list, and it varies year to year. Like I said, COVID has kind of thrown a wrench in things for a year. Hopefully we're going to be back to normal a little bit this year. There's also an official appeals process for many of these universities. So if you get rejected and you're still like, no, I really wanted to go there, you can fight it. I have a whole video on that. All right, number 7 tip for UC application. You have 4 essays on the UC application, your personal insight questions. I have a whole video on how to fill those out, so you should check that out if you haven't yet. But make sure you answer each one uniquely. One thing that happens a lot of the time, because UCs are 4 essays and a lot of other schools might be 2 or 3 essays, sometimes you guys take a longer essay and you just cut it in half and shove it into 2 different UC prompts, but it's kind of the same story. I'd rather see 4 different stories, and I want to see a different aspect of you coming out in each of them. every essay should feel unique and should have an individual voice and an individual point about you that it makes. My last tip for applying to UCs is take the easy backup school by checking more boxes. So UCs have an application that you've got to fill out, right? It's one size fits all. So the UCs are the most applied to schools in the entire country. And I know a lot of you are applying to like UCLA or UC Berkeley, but beyond those colleges that are the higher ranked ones, there are a lot of other boxes. There are 8 other boxes beyond the first one that's your first choice that are on your application. And checking those boxes gives you backup schools in a really easy manner without writing lots more essays. So just remember that this is an easy way to pad your college list with a few more lottery tickets to lower your general stress level. And you never know what's going to happen. You might think, oh yeah, I really am going to get into like this school or that school. And you know what? You might not. And that doesn't mean your life is over. But if you give yourself some more opportunities